Those of you who don't know me, my name is Barbara Strain, and I'm the current chairman of the Bellwether League Foundation. And I want to welcome everybody to the 17th Bellfire event. And this is the first kickoff event called our Symposium. It consists of usually two parts. This is three-parter this time. So we'll have two presentations from some capstone winners, and they'll present their work. And then we'll have a panel, a moderated panel of some of our future famers, and we'll explain what that is, and moderated by Randy Bailey. So I'm really happy to be here, but more happy that you're all here and you've come early in the event. You do know that at some point we do have refreshments, so I'm sure that's why you came early, so you wouldn't miss them. But this is just such a great event because we work very hard all year long, going through nomination processes, going through scholarship processes, going through capstone processes. So we have very active groups of people that are volunteers that work very hard to look through nominations and various applications. And so we do a lot of work. So this is really exciting for the sort of fruits of our labor here. So I want to make sure that we're specifically pleased to be on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, or as I was told by people, I must call it UWM. Jake was my tutor. People really refer to it as that because they've been so enthusiastic about partnering with us, about helping us find venues, so proud of their programs and things. And it's just great to be here. The dean, Kasha Chari, is joining us today, as well as Mark Kostfeld, who will be talking later. He's the tall gentleman in the back of the room, making sure, watching for students and things back there. He's been very instrumental in coordinating with us, getting students and others from the staff and things at these ceremonies to honor the program and to see what we're all about. And I want to first start talking about what these capstone awards are. So a few years ago, we started what's called the capstone process. And we actually send out a request for proposal with a variety of questions on it. And we send it out in the past, as well as this year, to about 35 different colleges and universities who have supply chain programs, because we want to introduce them to the healthcare supply chain. Not all of them have a program or maybe a course. They may have some guest lecturers come, but we wanted them to sort of get a feel of all the things that make up healthcare supply chain. And so we can get infused with these great students who are learning so much about all of the latest processes, data, all the greatest parts that are coming out of students this time. And it helps to infuse all of us with great workers that might come out of this. We have had one of our first presentations by the University of Michigan, who was our first award winner of our capstone. One of the individuals got a job shortly thereafter from exposure at the Bellwether League. So it's a very exciting time. So we score all these, and from the weight of the nominations from their professors, from them themselves, and how they are doing their projects. These projects are done in coordination with a provider supply chain. Sometimes the provider also asks maybe a distributor or a manufacturer to work on them, depending on what the project is. we started something new this year that the runner-up in our process provided a podcast, so interviewed and provided a video, which you can see on the Bellwether League website. And all of these sort of accolades for the students also comes with a monetary award for them and their program. So it's a really nice program that we've developed, and we're putting more emphasis on what these capstones are. So we have a treat today. Those of you who were here last year might remember Dr. Rajiv Duda, and he gave the first part of his PhD dissertation, and he's working with Ed Hiscock at Trinity Health on the project. And so he did get awarded his PhD not many months ago. And he's come here to give the sort of the second half, or the Paul Harvey used to say, for those of you who might remember, the rest of the story. And so I'm going to invite him up once I introduce him. So Dr. Rajiv Duda, who's currently in his newly named position as assistant professor in supply chain and operations management at the Farmer School of Business at Miami University in Ohio. He did do his dissertation titled 3 Essays Examining Technology Adoption and the Role of Physicians in Improving Efficiency, Quality, and Reducing Risk in the Healthcare Supply Chain. And he did his dissertation at the J.B. Hunt Transportation Department of Supply Chain Management at the Sam M. Walton College of Business at the University of Arkansas. So welcome, Rajiv.
Thank you all. Good afternoon, everyone. And since she already mentioned about me, I'm not going to talk much about introductions of myself. But yeah, so I'd first like to thank Ed Hiscock. Ed has been phenomenal in his support with my research, and he has been one of the PhD committee members as well. So a big thank you to Ed and Trinity Health. And of course, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the Bellwether League Foundation for supporting my research, and as well for giving me this opportunity to share my works with you in here. Okay, next one, please. And so I will, without further ado, I would jump into the rest of the story, right? So last year I gave my initial but that was actually project 3, that real-time location system. And I have a couple of slides if I have time, couple of slides towards the end. So if I have time, I'll go over. Else, I'm going to focus on these 2 projects where we look at how physicians' focus and manufacturer variation have an impact on the surgical supply cost and waste. And in this regard, I would like to acknowledge my my co-authors and my All right, thank you. My co-authors and my PhD committee members as well, Dr. David Dobrikowski, who is my mentor and major advisor, Professor Brian Fugate, and Professor Claudia Rosales, who have been involved in these 2 projects with me as well. So we are talking about operating rooms, right? They are a profitable area for the hospitals because of the amount of revenue they generate compared to the expenses they account for, right? And so that's an area that we can target if we are to improve the profitability of the hospital. Now, if we think about the expenses, supplies account for about 50% or a little more than 50% of the cost. So again, an area that we can potentially exploit to improve the profitability of the hospitals. And if we go deep into this category, implants, which are physician preference items as well, right? They become an obvious key target because these are the highest cost items, most expensive items that we have in this category. On the other hand, operating rooms also generate the bulk of the hospital's waste. And a significant proportion of that is generated because of the items opened in error, or items opened unnecessarily, or for accidental drops and spillages. Now, if we think about how we can make improvements in this, how we can reduce those, we need to think about the people who handle all these. And the majority of these are handled by the physicians, who are the key players in the operating rooms, right? And we look at this how from a perspective of how we can improve individuals' performances. And turns out in the literature, they tell us that individuals learn from repeatedly performing the same or fewer number of procedures, right? So think about, specialized procedural, especially true for specialized procedural tasks, right? Such as, sports or in surgical operating room. So part of an individual's performance will depend on their inborn skills. So for example, if you think about if someone has an extraordinarily flexible muscular and musculoskeletal system, right? They could be good at gymnastics, but the majority of their performance would depend on their practice, would depend on the experience they gain by doing stuff over and over again, on their training, right? Now, if we are talking about surgical operating rooms, obviously that is a cognitive intensive environment. So we look at that from a cognitive load theory perspective. So turns out the human memory has two functional parts. One is the working memory, and the other is the long-term memory, working memory or the short-term memory, much like your computer's RAM and hard drive, right? So any information that has to be processed by the human memory has to go through the working memory first, then it either gets stored or not stored in the long-term memory, depending on the individual's decisions. Now, much like your computer RAM, your working memory has a limited capacity of processing information. So the amount of work your working memory does in a given point in time is called the cognitive load, right? And research has shown that new information, novel information, imposes a higher cognitive load on the individual's memory. A second phenomenon that is important in here is the cognitive interference. Now, if you're switching between tasks or information, right, what happens is you have to employ part of your cognitive resources towards inhibiting the stimulus that is coming from the previous task or the previous information you just processed. So this is called the cognitive interference. And higher cognitive load and higher cognitive interference impairs the performance, especially true in a cognitive intensive environment, which a surgical operating room is. So we look at this and we propose that when physicians who are more focused, meaning that they're performing fewer types of procedures or surgical procedures over and over again, right? More focused physicians, they will have much less cognitive load and cognitive interference, right? So they will be much more effective in employing their maximum cognitive capacity towards performing the task at hand, right? So it will help in reduction of waste because they will, open fewer number of items in error. They will do fewer. They will open fewer number of unnecessary items. There will be, if you are at the top of your performance, you will do much less, events of drops or spillage or anything like that. So it will reduce the waste. At the same time, when you are at the top of your performance, you are concentrating, you are focusing, you are employing your highest cognitive capacity towards the execution of the task. You will be faster, you will be more efficient, you'll be more effective in what you do. So that is in the procedure, and that will also lead to cost reduction. That is our hypothesis too, is the arrow downwards, right? So it will reduce supply cost. Now, when we look at manufacturer variation, right, which is something that does exactly the opposite. It increases the cognitive load on the physicians because, manufacturer variation means that the physician is using supplies from a multitude of different vendors, from a multitude of different manufacturers. So they have to deal with a lot of more information than they would do if the manufacturer variation is not much, right? So when manufacturer variation goes high, then because of that variation, it will do the exactly opposite thing. So we will have a negative impact, or we'll have those relationships weakened when manufacturer variation is high. So those are our hypothesis 3 and 4, right? Negatively influencing, impacting those two relationships, the arrow above and below, right? So we went ahead and asked Ed if they could help, and they provided us an excellent data set that we could test these relationships with, right? So the data set comprises of 1.8 million surgical items we used across about 275,000 cases performed by more than 900 surgeons over the period of 10 years between 2014 and 2023 in 59 different OR departments. So this data set, when we analyzed this data set, this is what we found, right? So I think I'm loud enough, so I'll come here. So if we look at this, right, this is what our results look like. If you look at this, look at the top plot here. We're looking at waste, right? And we do see that physician's higher focus is good, because you see a lower waste, right? On this end, this is the high physician focus, and this is the physician. Now, if we look at more closely, look at the red and the blue lines, right? The red line being when the manufacturer variation was high, right, on top, and then down below, the blue line is when the manufacturer variation was low. And we do see, right, if you go back to your 7th grade algebra, your equation y equals mx plus b, right? You can easily figure out that the slope of the red line is much flatter. That indicates a weaker relationship, right, than the blue line. So we do see that when manufacturer variation is high, that relationship between physician's focus and waste is weakened. So that supports our hypothesis too, right? And when we quantify these things, we did see that there is a 4.2%, about 4% waste reduction, greater waste reduction for the blue line, that is a low manufacturer variation, in case of physicians who have a low focus. But it's even more dramatic for the physicians who have a high focus, right? We see that they have a 27% waste reduction between the red and the blue line. Now, if we compare the two, we see a 23% improvement in waste reduction if the physician is highly focused, as well as they have a lower manufacturer variation. So all these align with what we know, right? So next, we'll look at cost. So we're coming to this plot in here, and our hypothesis 1 and 2 were supported, and we see that our hypothesis 2 is also supported because physician focus is good for cost as well. So higher focus leads to lower cost. That's what we see in here, right? In general, this is physician focus, low focus, high focus, right? So high focus associated with lower cost. But, again, that behaves as we wanted it to behave, or we expected it to behave. But when you look at the manufacturer variation, you see the relationship actually improves. You see that the red line, which is high manufacturer variation, provides us with better cost performance, more cost improvement for the higher manufacturer variation and high physician focus, right? So our hypothesis 4 was not successful. So that made us think about that, right? Why our intuition, came out to be wrong, right? We scratched our head and we thought, well, we need to ask the people who do this. So we went ahead and did some interviews. We did an outside interview we asked folks, we showed folks these results and asked what could potentially be the reason that these highly focused physicians, when they have a higher manufacturer variation environment, right, they have a 5% cost reduction as opposed to low focused physicians with a low manufacturer variation having much smaller impact on the cost. So why would that be? And this is what they had to tell us. They say that when the manufacturer variation is low means that you are getting supplies from fewer vendors. Then the vendors, the manufacturers, think that we got their 100% of their wallet share. So we know that our reps are having a deeper relationship with those physicians. So they probably are trying to upsell us. They're probably trying to, sell push the most latest and greatest items to us, which may not always be the necessity of the case, and also may not always be the cheapest or the most economic option. So in that sense, they say what these results may indicate that a competitive environment in the OR probably is the best in terms of cost. We look at this from cost perspective. Right? So that's what we found from our folks at Trinity and even outside of Trinity when we interviewed. So what does all this mean, right? What does this everything that we just showed in this plot? What do they mean? Well, when we did all the maths, we find that when physician focus is high, so there is our physicians are highly focused and they work in a high manufacturer variation environment, there is a potential annual savings of more than $122,000 per OR department per year, even after accounting for the increased waste. So if you recall the waste, they had a higher waste when a high manufacturer variation was there. So even after accounting for that, we had $122,000 per OR per year savings, which translates to a potential annual savings of $7 million per year for the health system. Right. So we may say that when the healthcare leaders, hospital leaders, are trying the highly focused physicians to rationalize their vendors, they're probably not chasing the right goal. So what our results tell us and what our results indicate, right, it could potentially help to align those conflicting goals, align those, turn those adversarial relationships into something that is more cherished by both, right? More collaborative relationship. And how is that, you may ask? Well, if you went ahead and told your physician that, well, look, we don't want you to rationalize your vendors, but instead, we would like to help you become more focused on what you do. We would like you to be our specialists, our rock stars, right? They would probably love that, and that may bring the physicians and the hospital leadership together, which would be a huge deal. In addition to the huge potential savings that the hospital system can make. So that is the bottom line of this project, that we can bring together the physicians, the operations leaders, and the supply chain leaders together on the same page while saving money to the hospitals. Okay, so that is the implication, and that will be all for this project. Now, we have 2 minutes to just go over the last year. I just have a couple slides.
All right.
Yeah. So, and this is just a recap of what we did last year. So this is where we looked at how real-time location systems improve inventory performance, that is reduction of inventory, and also improve overall performance, that is total performance for in hospitals, and how hospitals' complexity impacts those relationships. And in this context, I would like to again acknowledge my advisor, Dr. David Delrigosky, and of course Professor Randy Bradley, who is in here, for their continued support and their guidance during my PhD and during all my research. So when we looked at that, we saw this. And again, we saw that when we have real-time location systems, the hospitals who had real-time location systems actually had a reduction of inventory. And when we did the math, we found that there was a 30% reduction for the live RTLS hospitals, as opposed to 10% in the hospitals that had no real-time location system. When we looked at the performance score, we saw that the performance score is improved, and when we looked at the potential role of CMI, which is the measure of complexity, right? We saw that this relationship between real-time location system and inventory actually is muted in a high CMI environment, whereas the relationship between real-time location system and the total performance score is amplified in this environment, which means that we see a differential impact of hospital complexity on this relationship. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now, or we can go over any questions that you may have during our reception over a drink. Thank you so much.
So that was very enlightening, and data coming from a value analysis point of view is king above all else. So that was really enlightening. And I think that we now have a few different reference points when we're talking with our leaders and looking at what your information is. So we're going to move on to our second capstone recipient. This is for the 2024 project. And she worked on the freighter shipment optimization project. So guess where she did this work? At the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in collaboration with the freighter Theta Care Health. And Jake Grunwald and his team in supply chain assisted with this project. So let me introduce Paige Weimer, who's the production scheduler at ABB Group in New Berlin, Wisconsin. That's where she works these days. She did receive her bachelor's in 2023 in business administration and logistics, materials, and supply chain management at the Lubar College of Business at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Welcome, Paige. Big green button.
Thank you for introducing me. How is everyone doing today? Good. Can you guys hear me fine? I just want to make sure I'm talking loud enough. Okay, great. All right, so this is the project that I worked on, the freighter optimization project. First, I just have a little background about myself. As she said, I majored in supply chain, and I also majored in marketing and Spanish as well. During my time at UWM, I did internships at Amazon as an area manager intern, and then a project intern at Freighted, of course. I graduated in December of 2023, and I have been working as a production scheduler at ABB since February of this year. All right, so I have a little icebreaker to start us off. It's a little gas station analogy that we have for this project. So how many of you on your way to work stop at the gas station and get 1 gallon of gas every single day? Raise your hand if that's you. All right, no one, because that's kind of ridiculous and kind of a waste of time. But essentially that was similar to the problem that we were having at Freighter. A lot of the locations within the hospitals were ordering orders almost every single day for the items that they needed. So expanding on the problem a little bit, the Freighter Health Distribution Center would often receive orders to deliver a product to a destination multiple times per week and at times in illogical units of measure. Almost 500 locations were averaging 2 or more requests for the same item per week. And then in addition to that, orders were placed using illogical units of measurement. So for example, they would order 48 eaches when it would come in a box of 50. So the first phase of this project was it involved around investigating SKUs being ordered 15 or more times a month at location 3000. So location 3000 is the big freighter in Wauwatosa. And then we just decided to focus on 15 or more times a month for this. If you think about it, there's 30 days in a month. So we focused on items being ordered every other day about. And then the goal for this part was to identify SKUs where ordering patterns could be changed to provide the biggest cost savings for a freighter. So the process for this, I initially created some summary statistics for April through September just to get a big picture view of what we were dealing with, what we were looking at. So ship to locations hovered right around 1,000 for this. Total lines, unique items shipped, shipments. And then as you can see, about a little less than half of these shipments were being shipped 2 or more shipments per week per location. I will say when I first did this initially, we looked at this data and we were looking at it and we were like, oh, you know what? It looks like some of this is wrong. It looks like some of the data was left out. I believe it was shipped to locations. Maybe they seemed a little low. So then went back in, got the data again and made sure all the data was there. So that was definitely a really important part, and something that this summary helped us for was to make sure that all the data was there and complete. And then that really helped with the final analysis. So after that, I created a summary data sheet of the top opportunities, which we defined as items that locations ordered 15 or more times a month. Then created a pivot table in Excel that identified the top locations and top items that were biggest candidates for improvement. And then in addition to that, I went to the distribution center in person and saw the storage areas in the hospitals to get a better idea of how many items the hospitals could store, how big these items were, really what they were dealing with in person that the data could not tell me. So that we initially identified 10 different opportunities. And then after that, we met with 2 supply chain managers at Freighter to discuss ordering in larger quantities less frequently. And then we discussed items that they thought would be good candidates for improvement and found additional opportunities based on their recommendations. So here is an example of what we were dealing with and looking at. This is from my opportunities template that I created for this project. So for this example, it comes packaged in one each per pair and 36 eaches per box. In September, they were ordering in quantities of 36 to 180. September, there were 20 orders totaling 1,944 units. So my recommendation to decrease this was 10 orders of 180 per month. Since I was able to look at the data and see that they had ordered 180 per month in the past, to be that sort of indicated that they could fit 180 of this in whatever storage location. So why not just order that amount every single time? Here's another similar example. I believe these are little pads. They come packaged 10 eaches per bag, 4 bags per case. September, they were ordering in quantities of 150 to 300. September, they had 18 orders totaling 3,400 units. So my recommendation was 12 orders of 280 per month to decrease that. So this is a non-example. This is an example that would not be a good opportunity for improvement. I just have the item here and not the location. It came packaged 30 eaches per case. September, it was ordered in quantities of 4 to 7. And then in October, there were only 6 orders totaling 31 items. So for this, it didn't really make sense to provide this as a candidate for improvement since it was ordered in only 4 to 7 and there were 31 items ordered, only 6 orders. It just wouldn't really make that big of an impact in regards to the previous examples that I showed. So here is my monthly analysis template. This is one of the templates that I used to do this project with. So this screenshot is of all the, there's a bunch of formulas in every single column that you would see if you clicked into it. And you would copy and paste the data on a different part of the template, and then it would just populate over here. So we had opportunities that is filtered on 15, I believe, since as I mentioned, we just focused on 15 or more per month. And then I have location and item. We decided, as I said, that we were going to link those together so that we could really focus on which locations were ordering which items and how many. Physical location, as I said, for this part of the project, we just focused on location 3000. You'll see there's a couple different ones up there. And then some other data that we used for this project. And then this part of the screenshot of the template is the actual data. So for this part, I would just copy and paste the data that I received, put it here, and then all my formulas would, and all the rows would get populated on this part of the template. All right, so the benefit for this initial part of the project, so it's a cost of $2 per line. So proposed September line reductions were 403, and then potential September savings were $806. So that's just for 1 month. So multiplied by 12 months, that is a yearly reduction of 4,836 lines and a potential yearly savings of $9,672. All right, so then we did a handoff. I created a template so this process could continue to be done on a month-to-month basis, and then continue to email opportunities for improvement to supply chain managers. All right, so then phase 2 was focused on changing the system. We investigated SKUs being ordered in incorrect quantities, and the goal was to identify SKUs that could be changed in the system to require ordering in full box, pack, and case quantities. And then also for this portion of the project, we decided to look at all freighter locations instead of just the location 3000 that we focused on previously. All right, so we investigated all SKUs at all 493 storage locations, which are the locations inside the hospitals, across 9 different sites. We compared the ship quantities against the full box quantities, and then we proposed SKUs to be required to be ordered in the full box quantities. All right, so this is the template that was used for this portion of the project. So the green ones are the slam dunk opportunities. Those are the ones where we should definitely pursue implementing this in the system. So for example, the second row up there that says 10 eaches, it starts with 10 each is the 103 209 item. If you go over a little bit, you'll see that 127. So that's saying that there were 127 orders in quantities of 10. So since there were that many orders ordering in a quantity of 10, they were always ordering in a quantity of 10, why don't we just implement that into the system to prevent it being ordered in an illogical unit in the future? Just implement it. They can obviously fit it in there. Let's just do it. Yellow was not quite as slam dunk of an opportunity, but still definitely something to look at. And then the pink was they were just being ordered in the wrong multiple. So for whatever reason, maybe they thought they were packaged differently. Maybe that's what they could fit. That's sort of not what this portion of the project was focused on, but it was still something that was revealed to us and maybe something to focus on in the future. So here were the each ordering results. So there were 51 SKUs that had minimal orders below the box pack case quantity. So those are the ones highlighted in the green. Easy to eliminate this each ordering, and it would prevent future orders of eaches. So here are the cost savings. So 66 total SKUs. I believe those are the ones that got approved. I believe that included some of the yellow ones as well. It reduced lines by 550 picked per month. Total savings of $2 per line. So that would be an annual savings of $13,200. All right, so this is the project summary cost savings. So as I said, phase 1 yearly savings was $9,672. Phase 2 was $13,200. And then the potential yearly savings would be $22,872 from this project. So that would be a reduction of 11,436 lines picked annually. All right, so how to do this at your location. I went over how we did this at Freighter. Here is how you could possibly implement this at your own site to get cost savings for your own site. All right, so some tips and tricks. So I would first recommend do a narrow focus via location, most common products, ordering patterns, whatever you want to do. So like I said, we initially had a very narrow focus on a specific location, ordering a specific item, and we just focused on getting those ordered in the correct units, and definitely go for the low-hanging fruit first. So as I said, we did 15 or more per month. We could very easily extend that lower if we wanted to. 15 or more per month, that's still every other day. That's still being ordered a lot. In addition to that, ask questions. That's sort of how we figured out that our data was at first incorrect. It was we asked questions and we figured out, hey, this isn't right. And it's definitely a good thing we figured that out at first, since if we didn't, our analysis would have been incorrect. And then, as I said, make sure the data is right and complete. And then for us, 2 templates worked well. The template with everything on it that we could see, and then our opportunities template that really narrowed things down for us. That was from my examples that I showed you. Those were from the opportunities template. All right, so some more tips and tricks. So create a summary of data first to catch any errors and missing information. We did pretty much all of this analysis with Excel, so definitely would recommend brushing up on Excel, learning it. Pivot tables, formulas such as VLOOKUP, index match. Definitely be good at those. Watch YouTube videos for them. Ask colleagues, ask friends for them. And then we did a lot of color coding as well, just so our brains knew, like, green is the slam dunk opportunity, yellow is the maybe, just to help demonstrate what is going on and what the data means. And then this is definitely a really important point as well. Talk with frontline employees, the employees that interact with these items, the employees at the warehouse that are picking these items, the employees that are working in the supply chain department that see these items. You're not going to be able to tell that one of these items that you're recommending for an opportunity for improvement is a really big, really heavy can of liquid that's medicine or something like that. So yeah, definitely see these items in person, see where they're stored, see how big these storage locations are. And yeah, that sort of wraps up the project. Any questions? All right.
Well, I think our healthcare supply chain of the future is in some pretty good hands. They've done some great projects, really digging in and reminding us all of those things that we need to keep in mind when we're working on things. So, talking about the future, next we have a panel of Future Famers, which are those who have gotten our Future Famers awards that have been in the field 12 years or less, but have done some significant work in their organizations. And it's going to be a moderated panel. And it's on the fresh perspectives on supply chain performance from a new generation of leaders. So I'm going to call the panelists one at a time as I introduce them, and then our moderator. So first we have Bruce Radcliffe from the Future Famers class of 2021, who's the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain Services at Premier. Welcome, Bruce. Then we have Jack Casella, the Future Famers class of 2020, who's the Director of Sourcing and Transformation and Supply Chain at Freighter Theta Care Health. Welcome, Jack. And Chico Manning, who's our brand new spanking person that you'll see later today getting his award, but he's the Future Famer class of 2024, who's the System Vice President of Enterprise Supply Chain at PIH Health in Southern California. Welcome to the panel all. And to moderate our panel, we have Dr. Randy Bradley, who's the AMR honoree class of 2020. He's an associate professor of supply chain management and information systems in the Department of Supply Chain Management at Haslam College of Business, University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Welcome, Randy Bradley, to our stage.
Thank you, Barbara. Good afternoon, everyone. Are we sure? I mean, I thought it was afternoon. Is it morning? Is it evening? Yeah. Did I miss it? All right. So I understand that because we're on a university campus that hazing is not allowed. So as a result of that, Chico, you will not be asked to go first at any time. Okay, I'm going to give you, as the newcomer, Future Famer, we're going to give you a little more time to think about your response to all the questions. Also, we have 50 questions and we intend to cover them all. So I'm just messing with you. But what I want to do is I want to start with Jack. And I want to give each panelist an opportunity, one, to sort of lay the groundwork for where they are, what they're currently doing, and how they made it to that particular role. And that'll set the foundation for some of the questions that we're going to ask later. So Jack, from 2020, we'll let you go first.
Sure. Thank you very much. Is this on? All right, he's got to kind of hold it close, I guess. So yes, Jack Casella, I'm the Director of Sourcing and Transformation for Freighter Theta Care Health's supply chain here in Milwaukee. So welcome to Milwaukee to all of you who are from out of town. I've been at Freighter for 14 years now. I started my career at Epic doing project management and implementations. And when I came to Freighter, I was supporting the ORs and got to see a lot of that waste and supply usage that we were talking about earlier, which got me interested in supply chain. So spent the last 8-9 happy years in supply chain, supporting data systems and now overseeing sourcing as well, which for many of us is all about IV solutions these days. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and just wanted to say kudos to everybody in this room. It's really an incredible group and a real honor to be sitting here.
Thank you, Jack. Bruce.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bruce Radcliffe. I'm the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain Services for Premier Healthcare. I think as with any of us in the room in supply chain, I don't know how I got here, but I'm here. But previous to Premier, I was actually with Advocate Aurora Health for about 13 years, leaving there as their Chief Supply Chain Officer. Before that, worked for Disney, worked in a tech company. And again, like I said, healthcare is the ultimate customer service industry, so it's a great place to be. But I'll say this, it's been interesting I've been with Premier about a year and a half now, to bring the provider perspective back into the GPO industry. So it's been a lot of learning, which is great. They're learning from me, I'm learning from them. But what I'll say is this, rooms like this is where a lot of great ideas happen, and industry, can be our partner to making, again, the next evolution of supply chain be really interesting.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. Chico.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I am the rookie, but I have a little icebreaker here. I'm on my 30th year in supply chain logistics. So 30 years ago, I was commissioned Marine Corps lieutenant, went to supply logistics school, Then spent 15 years in PepsiCo global supply chain and the last 9 years in healthcare. So even though I'm a future famer and I fit the under 12 year, I'm bringing about 30 years of collective supply chain experience. Today at PIH Health, beyond supply chain, I have decision support and supply chain analytics. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today about the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Chico, and welcome. So I want to get started with a different type of question, if I may. I know we're supposed to be talking about the future, but really what I want you to do is I want you to take a step back from the first day that you walked into the organization that you now serve and the personnel that you now support. And if you will, describe, and for you, you'll talk more from your client's perspective, okay? Sure. But what I want you to do is describe how we look at, assess, and measure supply chain performance then versus now. And we'll start with Jack.
Well, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I've done a lot of supply chain scorecarding over the years and a lot of performance measurement. That was sort of a core part of what we were doing. And without really putting a lot of details to it, when I walked in, most of our performance measurement was a PDF that came out, once a month, and it had some numbers on it. I'm not sure how many people were really looking at it. And it was very much focused on our internal operations. Things like how many PARs were we counting? How many PO lines did we cut yesterday? Things like that. And that's not to say that there weren't better frameworks out there. There were some tremendous ones from, ARM and all kinds of other organizations that had talked about the metrics we should be measuring. Since then, we've put a lot of effort around adopting those models. We came up with, I think when we brainstormed, there's 100, 200 maybe metrics that were recommended by the organization. But I think the thing that strikes me the most about it is twofold. First is the connection to the clinical strategy of the organization. The reports that we got at first were very much, like I said, they were about tactics. They were about the things we had picked, the boxes we had moved the day before. And the scorecards that we publish now are more about, they're connected to the strategic pillars of our organization. Things like employee turnover, which is maybe an HR metric, is now a core supply chain metric, or our impact to the communities that we serve through things like supplier diversity or environmental impact are now on our supply chain scorecard. So that's very, very evident in everything that we're doing. And then I think the other thing which appeals to sort of the data geek in me is it's much more interactive. We've got fancy, Excel data models and Tableau and Click and all kinds of other tools that are out there, which again, I think coming from an Epic background, those tools were always available to the clinical side. Epic was always dumping data into some giant data table, but supply chain's now getting those same tools. And I think that that's really recognition of kind of the status that we have in our organizations. It's been very useful, especially in reacting to things like, COVID or, shortages of products to be able to interact with that data on such a quick turnaround time, but also to have that integrated with things like your patient days or your census and things like that, all lumped into one giant data model.
Okay. Chico, what about you? And before you answer, now there's always a twist.
Yeah. After
you give your first answer, I want you then to compare that to the world that you came out of before coming into healthcare.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question and that curveball. So the initial question, so when I came into healthcare 9 years ago, if you look at a supply chain maturity model, which we're all familiar with, my organization was off the graph to the left, right? It was a pay at the pump organization. I remember about 6 months in, I went to the C-suite and I said, hey, you don't need me here. And this probably was potential career suicide. You don't need me here if you just need me to negotiate pay at the pump. The folks you have here have been doing that for decades. And we have partners that will negotiate that for you and say, hey, here's what you pay based off of a certain tier, right? What you need me here for is to create a supply chain that has a plan, a maturity model, and how to move that supply chain from left to right and beyond that journey with analytics, with data, with cost per unit, clinical integration, right? going beyond physician preference and what the vendor says you need, establishing a value analysis component. They spoke the language, but my first few months going to value analysis, it was basically automatic, right? As long as the vendor provided the slides and the physician or clinical administrator presented it, it pretty much got approved. Today in PIH Health, we have a supply chain analytics department, which we leverage data. We partner with our GPO partners. We partner with other vendors, and we let the data tell the story. So when we do go to VAT and we talk about clinical variation and outcomes, it's no longer just the price at the pump or the reimbursement. Now, from the world I came from, and we had a little sidebar earlier as we were prepping for this panel. So I came from PepsiCo 15 years, and in 2001, when I was right out of the military, the technology we had in the associates' hands in 2001, we could tell everything: labor productivity, attendance, where they were, what they were moving. And so my biggest wow moment when I came to healthcare was in 2016. I was like, so where are the handhelds? And so we have a legacy system, and I'll end it here. And many of you might have heard of it. It's called MS4, Siemens MS4 Cerner product. 95% of my supply chain team is younger than that product. And that product is running our finance accounts payable and receivable and our supply chain procurement processes. So what I'm challenging the organization to do and what I'm trying to champion is we need to go beyond MS4, Siemens, Cerner. We need to integrate all the data and technology we have, and we need to progress a little bit more further right on the supply chain maturity model.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chico. Bruce.
Growing up in supply chain with a larger health system and then coming into my role today where I get to see a lot of health systems, I think Chico and Jack hit on it really well. The evolution of the scorecard is really where the priorities have sit, right? So, and you join an organization, you want to see what they're about, find out what their scorecard looks like, what things are emphasized and other such. What I would say is I've seen an evolution for very transactional type scorecard to the point fill rates, par locations, number of POs, percentage of contract on spend on hand, into that clinical evolution. Sadly, what I'm seeing today is actually a movement to a scorecard around financial viability. And that's a scary scorecard to look at. Yeah. And that is how many cases leaving the OR upside down? What does my length of stay need to be reduced to in order for me to make payroll? How many days cash on hand do I have before I break my bond covenants that I have around public financing? So you can see these scorecards evolve from, hey, I just need to make sure that my products are here, to, hey, I want to be a clinically integrated supply chain, to how do I make sure my health system is actually around in the next 8 months? And these are very different scorecards that I have found that supply chain now sits at the table with a true balanced scorecard, which has people, process, and technology sitting at it. So some of the ways that these scorecards have evolved is, again, when you're thinking about financial viability, you have to look at resources. You have to look at HR and say, how many open positions do I have? How do I impact the cost curve of resources? How do I do that with technological, again, investments? The handhelds is a great example. So to me, the scorecarding has evolved tremendously. But back to what was it like when I came into healthcare? I would say the transactional scorecard would have been par, no pun intended. But that conversation around how do we just make sure the right things are there, the margin is downstream. And now the conversations are, how do I make sure that I have margin to begin with? And what is the portfolio deployment that I can afford to retain that margin so I can invest in my communities for tomorrow? Otherwise, without that, there's significant community impacts to overall health.
So Bruce, thank you very much. We're going to stay with you and come back this way with a follow-up question. So when we talk about the evolution, the evolving nature of the scorecards, to what aspects of healthcare, whether we're talking internal forces or external forces, what we say are actually driving these changes?
It's a great question. I think right now it would be hard for me to say internal is more predominant than external. I actually think it's the external that really drives the scorecard. The supply chain needs to evolve from a reactionary force to actually becoming a proactive force. And we see that through things such as national pandemics. We see the hurricanes. I mean, right now we're having conversations around Baxter and Ivy Solutions, and now another hurricane barreling down on Florida. So we the scorecard and other things really need to evolve. Instead of reporting out what's going on, it needs to be more geared towards leading indicators around whatever your strategy might be, resiliency, value, clinical integration, whatever, again, your strategy is. That's going to be the evolution of tomorrow, is how do I see what I need to see before I need to see it. That's the change.
Okay, thank you. Jack?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky question. I think there's a lot of external forces that we're all dealing with every day. Whether it be global crises and docks shutting down and things like that, that are all of our organizations are asking us to react to. I think there's also. It seems as though we're getting more internal support. I don't know if others are feeling this too, but that message, maybe it's coming in from the external side, is being communicated not only to the supply chain leaders in the organization, but also to the clinical leaders, the CEOs and things. And they're sort of pulling the supply chains along too, which is, it's helpful to have a little wind in your sails. It doesn't feel like we have to sell supply chain as much. With that said, I think that we also have a long way to go. I'd be interested in your perspective on this, but we have a long way to go to get to a point where we're at a fully developed supply chain like you might see in sort of consumer or manufacturing and things like that.
Okay. Chico, he set that up right for you, man.
Yeah, he did.
No,
I'm really enjoying this panel for sure. So I will tell you, to caveat on my fellow panel members, the pandemic was our Y2K, right? For everybody in the room. Before the pandemic, and many of you in the room blazed that path, it was hard to get to the table, right? And we've seen the discussion since then, right? Chief supply chain officers now becoming more prevalent, supply chain executives becoming CEOs, because organizations realize it wasn't just, do I have enough supplies? The supply chain is different than distribution and logistics. So definitely, as we as an industry performed, and we performed admirably on the global stage, it was our Y2K, and we need to leverage it, and we all as a community, and take that and excel to the upper echelons of the decision makers in our industry. So, and the scorecard piece, and I definitely appreciate what everybody's been mentioning. And I will tell you from my perspective, when I came to the organization, healthcare was very top line in regards to, we got to buy physician practices, we got to expand, and we have, before DRG and the Affordable Care Act, when you could charge anything you wanted, you could invest, you could build apartments and beds. But now today you have to fill those beds. So, and I remember going to a board meeting, and someone kind of said, "Hey, could you give a supply chain update?" And so this is my first healthcare board meeting, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to either win it or lose it here." So I went in with and a little teaching moment for the group, and I said, "Hey, what's our margin goal for this year?" And the board said 3%. I said, "Okay, so that means at every dollar of revenue that we generate, you're asking us to save 3 cents of every dollar." And they go, "Yeah, my job is to do what?" And they said, "Well, you need to support that." And I said, "Well, here's how I'm going to support that. Here's how supply chain is going to support that. For every dollar you avoid spending, you save how much?" And the board kind of looked at me, and I said, "You saved that dollar because you have appropriated that dollar to us, and we have not spent it for a variety of reasons. And how many revenue generated dollars will it take to equal that dollar at 3% margin?" So the folks was, 30 to 33, right? So you're asking my peers to go generate 33x what I can avoid in a dollar. So you need to invest the resources and the talent, because it's far easier to avoid spending a dollar than it is to generate $33 of revenue in our industry. And ever since then, they've listened. I'm getting the resources, we're getting the talent, and now they're coming to us saying, "How do we?" And it's not at the miss for the community, right? We're not taking away services. We're just being smarter about how we're spending the money. Mm-hmm. And for I tell my supply chain team this all the time: for every dollar you save, you're making that person who's trying to buy physician practices, expand services, and then those nurses, they're making those lives a whole lot easier. So.
Yeah, I love it, Chico. We've been years saying that if you look at a modern supply chain, the focus is not on cost savings, it's actually cost avoidance. That takes you much farther, but that has not been par for the course in healthcare. So I want to come back and play on your time in PepsiCo and also in the military, where customer centricity, for lack of a better term, is fundamental to everything you do around the supply chain. So when you take that and superimpose it over the world of healthcare, what exactly would a customer-centric supply chain look like, or how would it behave?
That's a really tough question. I like that. So I'll try to answer it properly. So you have to define the customer, right? And so in PepsiCo, the customer for a supply chain person was the sales team, right? What did the sales team need to put on the shelves so mom and dad could go buy the products? That's what generated the profits for that CPG company. In healthcare, there's multiple customers, right? As the panel has mentioned, we have our internal customers, finance, right? We gotta make margin. You also have your community. You have the forward-facing customer, and then right in there in the mix, I was pretty naive. I watched Grey's Anatomy. I didn't know nurses ran clinical departments. You learn that pretty quick in healthcare. That's right. So that's the third customer base. So I remember coming into healthcare going, okay, and as a supply chain professional and a function, you have to understand how do you deliver meet the customer's expectations, and they're all different, right? On the clinical side, it's all about quality and clinical operations. You need to get me what I need and make sure that it's appropriate. On the finance side, it's what we've been talking a lot about today. It's how do you maximize our margins? And on the community side, which I think is the area where supply chain needs to evolve to. Right, because we're starting to get real good about the finance. We're getting real good about the clinical quality aspect, but it's that patient piece, right? How do we affect that properly and support it from a supply chain function?
Okay. Bruce, we'll come to you, and then Jack.
Yeah, and I love the customer segmentation conversation. I think part of the conversation really needs to be is with the customer, you have to balance what are the expectations, right? Because you can have great cost, you can have great quality, or you can have great access. Good luck finding all three. You can usually get 2 out of the 3. And what I found really intriguing is in the customer base, whether it's internal or external, there's a different weight associated with each one of those, right? And I think solving that for supply chain is incredibly tough because we have dotted lines to a lot of the customers out there. So one of the things I think is just so important is that supply chains have to know who their customer is and what behaviors or actions impact who and how. Right? The nursing, it's such a good example. I mean, if you haven't been dyadded up with a battle axe nurse that will tell you exactly what to touch and what not to touch, you have not lived life. And that's very important. Cindy Hoyt Harvey, I still absolutely. But I just think it's important that customer segmentation and being able to thread the needle of where is the value for each area and try to find that Venn diagram of overlap. And it does exist. It's not a unicorn, but it is tough to find, and it's all done up front. Mm-hmm. So that's why what I encourage folks is do your diligence ahead of time before you move anything on the chessboard.
Okay, perfect. Jack?
Yeah, I love the question. I agree with what's been said. It reminds me of the conversations that we've had at a lot of our leadership retreats over the years at Freighter. We've talked a lot, and in all kinds of different conferences and supply chain too, about the consumerization of healthcare. And I think years ago, we maybe thought it was going to happen a little bit faster than it was going to, with more money being returned to the customers. They would have all these dollars, these healthcare dollars, to choose where they were getting their care. I'm not sure if that's really happened as much as some of the folks were saying, looking into a crystal ball. But nevertheless, I do think I'm just going to focus on the patient perspective. Ultimately, we're here to serve the patients of our community. And I totally agree with what you're saying, Chico. I think it's something new and exciting for supply chain, that we are starting to be able to really impact that group. So one thing that we recently did, we had a effort that we did with our population health group. They ran a bunch of analytics, and they determined that during COVID, there was a certain segment of our population that was not getting colon cancer screenings as frequently as the more well-to-do populations in the Milwaukee area. And if you need demonstrations of it, I can take you on a drive after this. There are certain streets in all of our cities that you cross that street and the house value of 2 identical houses drops in half. That absolutely plagues us here in Milwaukee. So they ran the analytics and determined that if we could send FIT test kits, colon cancer at-home screening kits, to a certain number of patients, and they would return them at a certain rate, we could then bring those rates of colon cancer screening back into the same level across all populations, and have more equitable healthcare. So that was a challenge for us in supply chain. We didn't do mailers to patients' homes, but the patients needed it, and our population health group, led by some excellent physicians, had asked us to partner with them on it. And since then, we've done fit testing kits. During COVID, we did pulse ox monitors. We're doing. I can't even remember what they're doing now. I think they're doing blood pressure cuffs to patient homes, right. And it's this sort of new thing for us in supply chain to have direct contact with patients, which is both exciting and terrifying, because now you have all these new challenges. Who's showing up to the door? How are they trained? Is that a Freighter brand, or is that just a random driver through Uber Eats or something? It's a lot of new questions, but it's very exciting.
So, Jack, I want to stay on that same point that you're talking about, because when we start talking about the relationship between provider organizations, your supplier partners, but then that also brings into this conversation the payers. Mm-hmm. And you talked about the financial models. And if you have a savvy executive, they're going to want to help you drive revenue, not just control cost. But part of that driving revenue also means, how do you minimize the risk that we pose to those payers? Because one of the faster way to increase revenue is to make sure you can get better reimbursements on the care and services that you're providing. So, Jack, I'll start with you in terms of, in your role as a supply chain leader, what can you do versus what should you be doing to help further that particular conversation?
Well, that's a big one. Can I go second? No,
you can. Yeah, I'm just kidding. You can always toss Chico.
Yeah, it's a Chico here. I just wanted to take that
first, but you can.
No, it's. I think it's a really interesting point, and I'll just share where we're at in supply chain. It's particularly from a value analysis perspective, I think is where this comes in the most. Is that value analysis has evolved a lot over the years, from the perspective that I think someone was saying you just had the vendor provide their slide deck and it got approved. We're now looking at much more of the clinical data, but now we do want to start asking those questions about what are the revenue implications to do this particular service or to use this particular product. It's a new relationship for us to partner with our finance partners around that conversation, around the revenue side, not just around the cost. I'll be honest, I think it's a big opportunity. I don't think we've really mastered it yet. I think we're asking the right questions, but I don't think we have the right connections made, the right systems, the right skill sets yet to really get into that.
Yeah, perfect. Chico, anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, so I'll use my health system as an example. So in California, it's a capitated model, right? So you get a set amount of money, and then you got to go fight for that money, even though they allocate that money for you. And so where we are helping in that instance is in supply chain. I brought this from my PepsiCo time. Is my last 5 years of PepsiCo. PepsiCo decided to really blow up and bring in-house the Lean Six Sigma methodology, right? I became a full-time black belt in 2010. I basically was an internal consultant, went across the globe for PepsiCo to basically optimize processes. So what I have offered to the organization, and when we started about 2 years ago, is create that type of organization. And I know lean approaches have been made, Virginia Mason, great example, and some other great organizations. But at PIH Health, when it was first brought in, it was a more touchy-feely type of approach, right? One example I use is when patients put on a survey that they wanted them to leave happy, they took our linen towels and made little bunny rabbits, and they put one on every patient's bed, and they took it home. And then and someone said, hey, that costs money, right? And so they go, well, we're getting the patient satisfaction score increase. And the other example is someone said, how do we make it quiet on the floor? Let's put carpet everywhere. Well, I will tell you, it costs millions of dollars to put carpet in all these clinical floors. And for anybody that's been in healthcare more than 6 hours knows carpet doesn't go well on clinical care floors. And we have spent the better part of this year ripping up all that carpet, we as an organization. So how do we influence that from a lean perspective? We're bringing that lean approach in. We're kind of saying, hey, what's the voice of the customer, the voice of the employee, the voice of the process? And we're kind of adding that to the decision making.
Yeah, just a couple of things to add. There's a whole different debate around healthcare consolidation and the pros and cons. But certainly when you come into, what are the impacts from the payer community around these health systems consolidating, one of the things actually is the data sets, right? So one of the most powerful things that you can actually leverage back as a health system provider is how your data set is influencing the community, meaning that your protocols, are they outperforming others, et cetera. And to me, supply chain is one of the few demand signals that we have that is forced to be forward deployed to those communities, right? We have to get them products, we have to send services, et cetera. So it's just interesting that with that consolidation, these massive data sets, if it's an integrated data set, an integrated system, you actually have some firepower to have a conversation with a payer to say, hey, here's the patient population that we forward deployed a meal to before a surgery. Here's the patient population that we sent iodine before the anterior hip is done. And here's the readmission rates. Here's the infection rates of those people. So that can't be done with an N of 10, but with an N of 10,000, now you've got something on your hands. So interestingly enough, that as these health systems have consolidated to fight against the payer and that leverage, it's actually done one of the other things, which is created best practice vetting. And where there's best practice, and health systems do a great job of sharing that because it's a non-competitive, again, clinically oriented outcome, they're doing a really good job of having a different payer conversation with the data sets that support it.
So let's take the pulse of the room right quick. Right? We're going to take you off the hot seat for a minute. Let's ask them a question. You guys cool with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. How many of you are being approached by payers to have these types of conversations, or by members of your C-suite say, how can you help us address these concerns of the payers? Sorry? The C-suite, but you're not hearing it from the payers, but the C-suite are hearing this, and they're coming to you. Karen says she's not seeing that.
What if you ask the question differently? How many of you have gotten letters from payers saying, hey, I'd like their patient to have this implant?
If you have it, it's coming.
I have, and in my new role, I have a couple on my desk, but in my prior role, I'd have dozens saying, hey, this patient is pre-qualified for a Stryker knee. What happens when that's not on formulary?
Right.
Now what? It's happening real time.
Yeah, we're starting to see this, maybe not so much in your inpatient environment or not even coming through your ED, but in facilities, ancillary facilities, we're already seeing this where payers are asking you to provide the data that demonstrates that you're reducing their risk. And then what they're going to do is they're going to challenge you and say, well, wait a minute, your data doesn't match ours. So it's not enough. And I'm bringing this up because this is where the panel is trying to take us, because in supply chain, we talk about these three flows. But in healthcare, we primarily only focus on one or two of them. That financial flow is not just what's happening within the walls of your facility. It's what's happening outside the walls of your facility. Someone is pushing dollars in and you're taking dollars out of someone else's pocket. And oftentimes it's either the patient directly or it's the payers. So when we talk about a fresh perspective in terms of where we're going, we have to truly practice supply chain end to end and not just talk about supply chain having multiple endpoints. So I'm going to come back to you guys now. We just want to give you a break and a breather while I come back with one of your last questions here. So how do we balance the efficiency of the supply chain? And we can look at that in through whichever lens you want in terms of determining efficiency, and the flexibility of your delivery models and delivery mechanisms. So again, Jack, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Bruce, or you can toss it to whomever you like.
Yeah, no, it's a constant question for us. We're living through a really interesting time right now with trying to balance that efficiency and the flexibility in our organization. So we just merged with Theta Care Health, which is our new partner in sort of central Wisconsin. They were a very lean, just-in-time inventory model, one of the earliest to really champion that. It's an incredible system to see it, from end to end. I've been on the distribution side all the way to the supply closets. Someone was teasing me that supply chain always likes to look at the most interesting areas of the hospitals. We look in all the closets. And then there's Freighter, where we built our self-distribution center that Paige talked about in her presentation. And times where there are crises, that flexibility of having a distribution center is just incredible. I mean, it gives you It doesn't make the problem go away, but it gives you breathing room. It gives you a lot of assurance in your healthcare facility. Now, the flip side of that, though, is that I don't know, a month ago, things had already started to fade from people's minds about the COVID crisis. And, everyone's starting to think, wow, do we really need all this investment and all this real estate and things like that? Maybe we should think about something else. And I think that where my head goes is there's a balance there. There's got to be an efficient way to do both a very lean inventory model, but also to have the flexibility. If I could pivot on that completely outside of the physical stuff, is the systems and data side. We've seen on the system side the brittleness of all of us using Microsoft and CrowdStrike and all that, and the whole world blows up with one software update. It's a similar kind of thing there. I mean, it's great to have the efficiency of us all using one platform, but it really has caused a lot of problems. I think I don't know what the answer is to that. I think that's something we're going to have to struggle with for years here.
Bruce?
It's a great question, and I'll just pick on Jack for a second here. But, if you have a CDC or distribution center, it's kind of like owning a boat, right? The day you have it is a wonderful day, and the day you sell it. A distribution center is a great idea during a pandemic. It's not a great idea when interest rates are at 8%. Right. Here's my point. Is efficiency and flexibility is a little bit more like an Etch-a-Sketch, right? Where you're moving both dials at the same time, always the same time. And I think every product or data infrastructure or other such, that's what we're doing. We have multiple dials at the same time, because when there's a recall, boy, you wish you had the flexibility. When that flexibility doesn't create efficiency in dollars and cents, oh boy, what happens when you identify a clinically superior protocol, such as breast cancer and treatment? Anybody who doesn't really abide by that breast cancer protocol is just about at risk of malpractice. Okay, so zero flexibility, incredibly efficient, question mark. So I just bring it up to say, I think we're in a constant ebb and flow of those two dynamics at all times. And we have internal and external factors to it. So I would just say that we need to meet people where they are. In the CDC example, if you have one, great. How do you make it as most efficient as you can while retaining some flexibility? If you don't, maybe how do you leverage someone else? We need to get creative around it, because I'll say the prior strategies of build it and they will come, do this and it will harmonize. In today's day and age, the external and internal factors are happening too fast, that really what you're doing is you're flying by wire with the Etch-a-Sketch, and you're balancing it real time. And I think that's what will create the has and the has nots of, again, efficiency, flexibility, is the people who can adapt to what's going on around them.
Now, Chico, you came from a world where you had no choice but to balance those two things.
Yeah.
And in some cases, companies like PepsiCo were successful, and then in other cases were not as successful given the ebbs and flows of the economic environment. So going back to, again, leveraging your experience there, and then also take your experience from the military, right? When you've got to serve the warfighter, you need to be both efficient and flexible. And if not, lives are on the line, much as we see in healthcare. So how do you take that and juxtapose those things?
That's a great question and great twist on that question. So just like the other panelists have said, let's go before COVID. Coming from PepsiCo is we own all our distribution centers. We own all of our manufacturing facilities, end-to-end supply chain. The only thing we don't own but we contract with them are the farmers, right? So the raw materials. So I came into healthcare with no experience with healthcare logistics, and I thought, you know what? I was shocked. And how many of us were shocked at the size of your storeroom, right? Mm-hmm. I remember walking in going, where's the warehouse? And I remember Shelly Gahuman looked at me and goes, "This is your warehouse." And I said, "Shelly, I can see all four walls." And she's like, "This is your warehouse." I go, "How do you, in a 600-bed hospital, bring enough product in so you're not always emptying the warehouse?" And she goes, "We do it." And so there's a distributor's truck that comes in Monday through Friday, semi-trailer, guys offload it. They put it in the warehouse and it goes out to the floors. Now, so that's when I learned, okay, so we're not a big distribution warehouse. And I get that. And then the pandemic hit, and then we had to become one really quick. And an example I use is before the pandemic, we would average 200 isolation gowns a month. Pandemic hit our New York and California, which was March of 2020. For those of you that were watching the news, I needed 20,000 isolation gowns a day. There's not a distribution center in California that was ready for 20,000 a day. And that was just PIH Health. Everybody needed isolation gowns. So we were that close to Glad trash bags. So I learned we got to be a little bit more nimble. We got to be a little bit more careful. And I liked what Bruce had mentioned. We got to find that ebb and flow, right? So are we going to go and build a big distribution center and put 1 million isolation gowns in there? No, it took us almost 19 months after the pandemic ended for us to get, before we bought another isolation gown from our distributor. We had 19 months of inventory when the pandemic ended. And so a lot of people are like that. But do we also have to be nimble? As the moderator mentioned, from my Marine Corps time, if you don't have, you could have lives on the line. So you have to figure that out. The analytics, the data, the platform, as I mentioned, I have a platform that's older than most of my workforce. We got to be smarter in what we have. And then the last piece I'll throw out there, and I was waiting for everyone to bring this in, is the perpetual inventory, right? How many of us grew up in a world where the perpetual inventory ended in that small storeroom? And all the finished goods that sat on the floors and sits in the ORs that's worth millions of dollars, your system says is expensed. Yeah. But is it? No, it's sitting in the IR, in the CAF lab. And even today, my organization does not have a perpetual look at 90% of our inventory value outside of the storeroom. So that's something that we need to strive for as an industry. I know technology's out there that can do that. It's up to supply chain professionals like all of us in the room to kind of make people aware of that. Because when I brought up perpetual inventory, I don't think there was a single person outside of supply chain that knew what that word was, with chief in their title. And how can that be, right? These are big decision makers. And they don't understand the difference between perpetual inventory, leave the storeroom. Mm-hmm. They, on their P&L, on the financial document, they says, you're spending this much money. I go, we haven't spent that money. Right. That money's sitting in the IR lab. Mm-hmm. And I think when the finance guys first realized that, we got them smarter. Then we start getting everybody else smarter. And so that's the journey we're on.
So there's a phrase that we use to describe finished goods inventory. Mm-hmm. Simple. Junk nobody wants or needs. Because if they did, it wouldn't be sitting there. And that's the whole point, right? We oftentimes will store things because we don't want that inevitable moment to come where we won't have it. But the question is, how often does that inevitable actually arrive? And going back to the point that all three have made, we have the data. To Paige's point, we can build the models and we can estimate with great level of accuracy and certainty about when that moment is going to arrive, in most cases, not in all cases. So guys, I'm going to throw one last question at you and I want you to realize this when you answer. You're the only thing between these people and cocktails. Okay? Now, it's not me, it's you. That's right. So I'm going to give you this one last opportunity. I'm going to give you a thought and you can answer it however you want. When you look at where you are now, where we are now in healthcare supply chain, where we think it needs to go, what do you envision as some potential disruptors or landmines that we need to be aware of? You can answer however you want. Yes. Chico, I didn't call on you now.
I know, but I feel
for the record that you chose to speak first.
I just feel bad because I've been given the opportunity not to go first, so I'll go first on this one. So a potential landmine. So today, how many Starbucks drinkers do we have in the room? How many order their drinks via the app? So Starbucks app works anywhere in the world. It looks the same when you turn it on. When you order, it looks exactly the same no matter you're in Hawaii, California. I ordered one this morning on my way here. It looks the same. And when you get to the store, the product is exactly what you wanted. It also tells you when you're out, when they don't have what you need. That is where that's where the whole world's at. Mm-hmm. Healthcare is not there, right? We still got to make a phone call to get an appointment to see someone so they can tell you, hey, you need a scan, you need this. Mm-hmm. We have to, as an industry, and supply chain is going to be a big part of it, get to that. We have to integrate with that technology. That's the big landmine I see is we're not where the world is when it comes to user interface in your hand.
Good point. Jack?
Yeah, I think the one that I have been thinking about a lot recently, we're doing a ERP evaluation as part of this integration that I mentioned. And so I've had the pleasure of watching a lot of ERP demos recently. Many of you have probably had that pleasure as well. And the thing that's been interesting to me about it is watching how AI has advanced in those demos. It's not a sort of the last thing that they talk about. It's integrated in with everything else. Here I am as a manager. I'm writing the person's performance eval. Click the ChatGPT button, and it populates something. And that's today. That's not something that's out in the future. I know AI is a big buzzword, but what I think about in that context is that for many of us, the migration to the cloud has happened. It's not very fun from a point and click perspective, but the result of that is that these massive data sets that we've been talking about are now coming online. They're coming online through aggregations of healthcare systems, through cloud migrations, through Epic migrations, all these kinds of things. And an AI being fed with that, once somebody figures that out, it's going to be incredibly disruptive and powerful. That to me is really exciting. And I think about how do we prepare our associates for it? Many of these folks who have, they're incredible. They're incredibly dedicated. There's some folks who've been in my organization now for one's almost at 50 years. She's outstanding. How do we prepare all of us for those kinds of skills and those kinds of disruptions?
Perfect. Bruce?
I think a landmine that's out there, and I love the technology theme from my panelists mates. My biggest concern is that we're going to put AI or technology over garbage data. Our data is garbage today, guys. Over 65% of all invoices show up on paper today. And as far as I know, AI doesn't do well over paper. So the concept being is that we are going to miss the wave of technological advancement if we don't do the time to fix the plumbing around the data, because we don't know what those huge data sets are going to show. I mean, healthcare is probably the industry primed with the most amount of data that we can't possibly comprehend. I mean, I heard a fact the other day that typical physicians, in 1950s doubled their information in their career twice. Now they do it something like every 6 or 8 weeks, the amount of information that's out there today. So my fear, my landmine is that we have incredible technologies in the wing. We have big box ERP, we have AI, we have natural language processing, all the things. But if we don't stop for a second and say this mountain of data needs to be harmonized, needs to be cleansed, and then overlay the great stuff on it, I'll give the analogy. It's like building a hot tub on the 3rd floor of your house without a foundation. And that's what I'm concerned about, is we're going to have inequalities of outcome, inequalities in data sets. I mean, a great example is, the minority population is the least represented in these data sets. And yet we're going to run AI on top of it to say, here's the correct protocol. That scares the hell out of me. So the landmine, I believe, is that we don't do the work to clean up the data sets before we give it to Superman AI. And then let that thing figure it out. And it's way above my pay grade, but that's my fear.
So we're looking for an easy button in the middle of a forest fire.
That's right.
That's what you're saying. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you would join with me in thanking our panelists. Great job. And Barbara, we're going to hand it back over to you. Great job. Yeah. Do we stay?
Well, thank you, Dr. Bradley, for throwing them all the curveballs and things. I'm a big baseball fan, so I love curveballs and that sort of thing. And thanks to the panel, I think you heard some really great things about what's going on today, what's going on in our minds and things, and what needs to continue to go on. And it is all about the data. See, we've been talking about that all day. So exciting stuff. So, it mentioned that we do have cocktails and refreshments in the room next door. We'll be doing that up until 7 p.m. until we have our award ceremony in even another bigger fancy room. So everybody is welcome to go to the reception. Please talk to our presenters, our panelists, others, and get to know one another. And we're going to really learn a lot for the rest of the day. And thank you again for coming.